Welcome back, Thrivers. Here we are. Happy Halloween to you. And we are coming to you today from the University of Georgia. So, our guest is a DVM PhD candidate, and I am so excited to share this story and this journey because, again, we know that there are so many careers out here that everybody is like, wait, you do what? So, Jordan Parker, you are coming to us from Comparative Biomedical Sciences in the Department of Large Animal Medicine and Surgery at UGA. Am I correct? Did I say all that right?
Yes, you did say it all correct. It's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. So we want to know all about how you came to be a DVM PhD candidate. So let's start at the beginning. Where are you originally from?
I am actually originally from Marietta, Georgia. So I did come back home to pursue my advanced degrees here, but I did my undergrad at the University of Kentucky and my master's there as well. But it is nice to be back home in Georgia.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more then about, like, you say, I think, was it 11 years old? You've been, as I will always say, either a horse crazy girl or a crazy horse girl since 11 years old.
Absolutely. I've definitely been, I would say maybe a little bit of both, a little bit more crazy horse girl, a horse crazy girl. But since I was 11, I knew that I wanted to work with horses. I had just started riding and I had a blast. I built great community with the other girls that I rode with. And I knew that that was the kind of people that I wanted to be surrounded with my whole life and dedicate my life to helping horses because they're just such cool animals. And we're so lucky to be able to work with them.
I agree. I agree. When did you decide you knew you were going to be a veterinarian?
So that was a pretty early decision, actually inspired by my mom. So my mom's a small animal exotics veterinarian, and I have always loved the sciences. So I really early on decided that I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I like to joke that I chose large animals so that my mom and I wouldn't argue over how to treat things. But really, it is horse motivated. I do just enjoy the horses. So I've always kind of known that I wanted to be a veterinarian, but then exploring the options within the field of veterinary medicine has really opened to my eyes to all of the different ways that you can be a veterinarian and you can do vet med.
Yeah. So I want to get to that, but I'm not done with the youth self of Jordan Parker, right? Because you have some cool background, especially in your high school and collegiate years, where I think that you may have ridden in a presidential inaugural parade. Is that correct?
That is correct. So I was the captain of the Culver Equestrians, one of the co-captains, I should say. The other captain with me was a girl named Ashley Dillard. And we led the Culver Equestrians, which is the mounted drill team during the 27th presidential parade in January 2017. That was such a cool experience. I am so grateful to Culver Academies that I was able to do that. So they're famous for having the Black Horse Troop, which is the boys mounted unit, and then the Equestrians, which is the girls mounted unit. So I rode a horse named Rochambeau, and I just remember all the long and early morning practices we had to get ready for that parade. And then on the day of the parade, we were hand walking our horses for a long time. And when we finally got started riding, everything was going great. And my horse kept at the markings on the road of the bicycle lanes because we didn't have bicycle lanes in Indiana where we had been practicing. So he saw the little guy on a bicycle and he was like, not about it at all. But it was awesome. We managed to go through just fine. And it was such a cool experience to be able to do that.
I can only imagine that that had to be super incredible. And yes, like the practice that goes into that and the preparation. And oftentimes we just don't think about the fact, oh, we didn't train anywhere where they saw the image of a man on a bicycle in a bicycle lane.
Right? Like, yeah, he just something about the curves of the wheels, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
You
Yeah.
never know what they're thinking.
No, we do not. We do not. You were also part of the IEA team. Is that correct? And tell our listeners, if they don't know, what that stands for and kind of what you did.
Yeah, so IEA is the Intercollegiate Equestrian Association. or sorry, Interscholastic Equestrian Association. And that is a very cool program that helps students who maybe don't have their own horses show and compete. And I loved the IEA program because I thought it made me a very versatile rider. I was pretty comfortable getting on any horse that I drew and riding them in arena for flats and fences. It was a very cool opportunity so that every rider could score points for themselves, but also for their team. So we got to work in this team environment. I was captain for my high school IAA team as well. And I strongly recommend that anybody who is serious about horseback riding tries a program like this where they get to ride a lot of different horses, because it's certainly takes talent and skill and practice to ride one horse very well. It's a little bit different, I think, to ride multiple horses adequately and get the job done, right? Like those are two
Yeah.
different bars for sure. But I think it's a good skill set to have to just be comfortable with a lot of different kinds of horses.
Yes, I really wanted you to speak to that because I was part of the IHSA, which is the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association in college. And I believe that you hit the nail on the head, right? The camaraderie, the teamwork, the individual work, whether or not you grew up and were afforded the opportunity to ride or take lessons, this is for everyone from beginner through advanced and into open, that these organizations teach us so much about horsemanship and the ability to get on different horses. And some of them we are going to be exceptionally challenged by, and others we're going to get along fabulously with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I also rode IHSA in college. And one of the things that I loved about that is that they had specifically a division for people who had never ridden horses before.
Yeah.
So we were always trying to recruit people to come join that division. And it was really exciting to expose people a little bit later in their lives to horses and to see
Yes.
them build a passion for the sport. It was a very inclusive and welcoming community. I loved the Kentucky Hunt C team that I was on.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted our listeners to hear about those organizations because, again, as many of our listeners are looking at schools, looking for schools, in the middle of their undergraduate career, those are the kinds of organizations that really do give you a competitive advantage and open your eyes to so many people and opportunities that are just going to be so key for how you build your career and how you build your life from here on out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great opportunity, like you said, to interact with other horse people and kind of just appreciate the spectrum of horse people as a community. We're all very different and we're all united by this one very strong motivation to celebrate the horse or to appreciate the fact that we get to ride horses or work with horses in any capacity. So I
Yeah.
definitely recommend doing an IEA or an ISSA kind of team if you haven't had that exposure before, because the dynamic is a little bit different than normal showing. And I think that's a really important aspect of the horse community.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get figured out, Jordan. How did you go from Georgia to the University of Kentucky? Let's talk about this. You call yourself a professional student, and it's not been that long ago that you graduated. I think you got your first degree in 2020. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah,
How did
December
you get
2020.
there?
Yeah, so this is also a funny story. When I had been applying to colleges, I applied to a lot of different schools. I applied to the Savannah College of Art and Design because they actually have a very, very decorated IHSA team. And so I was really interested in writing with them. And I applied to Clemson and a handful of other schools. And my mom had told me that I needed to apply to the University of Kentucky because that's obviously a huge horse area. They have a very strong equine science program. And my older sister had gotten a scholarship to go to the University of Kentucky, and I didn't want to be a copycat. um, but my mom made me go toward the school, and I toured the Gluck Equine Research Center. And I remember very clearly them sharing with us that at the time they were one of the only equine specific research centers in the US. And I think now are the only equine specific research center in the US that's not associated with a veterinary school. And I was very impressed by that commitment to the horse
Yeah.
and that they were putting academics and science behind the love of the horse and this huge community. We went to Keeneland that weekend, I think. And going to the races is so much fun, like getting dressed up and having everybody celebrate the horses and watching them perform these incredible athletic feats. It was such a blast. And Kentucky is also, of course, gorgeous.
Right.
So I was sold pretty easily. And honestly, I think it was luck that sold it for me. I remember meeting with some of the equine faculty and being just super impressed with everything that they had to offer. And
Yeah.
then it was kind of a no-brainer. And my mom likes to make fun of me. She says all the time, "You weren't even going to go to Kentucky and you loved it there."
Right.
She was right.
Yes.
So sometimes when you're, and I'd also had this weird notion that it wasn't the right kind of horses because Kentucky is very famous for its race horses, and I grew up doing hunt seat
Right.
activities. There is no right kind of horse. That was a really silly idea that I had. And I'm so glad that I gave Kentucky the chance because racing is amazing. It's such a fun discipline that I didn't know very much about until I got there.
Yeah.
And so I think keeping your mind open is very important. And even if you're like, I'm not sure that I would love this, try it anyways,
Right.
because, I just committed to a tour of the university. That's all I committed to. And then I was sold.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I made that decision. So,
Yeah, and that's important to hear, right? And I have that conversation often. I actually just recently had it at an event that I spoke at. And it's so important to go and tour a handful of schools because you can't choose on paper. You can't choose by looking online. You can only really make the best decision for yourself by getting on campus. And oftentimes it's kind of a feeling. You're like, this is where I belong.
yes, it definitely was a feeling of this school fits me and this
Yes.
school aligns with the future plans that I have. But I think even if I wasn't sure of what I was going to do, Kentucky still would have been the right place. They had
Yeah.
lots of opportunities and they were sharing those when I went and visited. So
Right.
it was very cool.
So you got your undergraduate degree and then decided to stay on. So let's talk a little bit more about that because that really speaks to where you are. And I want our listeners to hear, what does a DVM PhD candidate mean? What does that mean? So let's start with kind of that experience of staying on for your master's.
Yeah, so of course, towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I applied to veterinary school and I had applied to 4 schools, I believe. But I had graduated actually a semester early. And part of the degree requirements for the equine science degree at UK is that you do an undergraduate internship. And I had connected with Dr. Emma Adam and did an internship with her. And because it was during COVID, most of my internship responsibilities were crunching data, but I was working with her in a research capacity, organizing this very large weight data set that we had, which was so fun for me to look at. We were looking at weights of foals from the first day of life. They got weighed every day for a week. Then they got weighed every week up to 2 months. And then from there, it was like every 2 weeks. And they followed these foals out to 18 months. It was a
Wow.
tremendously large data set, but it was really fascinating to me to see how the weights changed. I distinctly remember a foal in the data set being born. She's a normal full-sized horse now, but she was born at 60 pounds, which was like the absolute bottom percentage of weights.
Right.
And from that, I wouldn't have guessed that she made it. And I was able to follow her out through all 18 months and track her weight. And she grew up to be just the same size as the rest of her peers. It was
Wow.
amazing. But Emma was amazing as well. She really encouraged me
Yeah.
and was really invested in my success. And when I went and applied to vet school and I left, for that semester to go work at a veterinary clinic, she stayed in contact with me. And it was really clear to me that she was interested in my success. And that
Yeah.
was a very nice feeling. So when the first couple of school results came in and I hadn't gotten into vet school, I was feeling a lot of emotions, some shame, maybe a little bit of embarrassment, disappointment. But I swallowed that pride. I communicated with Dr. Adam what was going on. And she's like, well, why don't you just come and apply to be my graduate student as well, in case those other schools that you hear back from, it doesn't go the way that you think that it's going to go. And I'm so glad that I was vulnerable with her like that because I did end up applying to the master's program at the University of Kentucky, and they gave me a really nice offer. That was a paid position. So I didn't realize that I could get paid to go to school. I did eventually end up getting off the wait list at a school, but I was like, 2 years for a master's degree. It's a free degree. They're going to pay me. I'll save up some money before I go to vet school. I think that this is the best trajectory for me. And then I fell in love with the science that I was doing. So again, Dr. Adam was my mentor, and she really is a huge reason why I'm here in the DVM PhD program now, because she was so encouraging and she really believed in me. And at a time where my ego had just taken kind of a big hit because I didn't immediately get into vet school, that was, I needed that.
Yeah.
And she provided it for me. And so I went full steam ahead in my master's program. I challenged and applied myself. And I was like, this is so cool and I love this. And Dr. Adam again was like, well, why don't you go continue doing research, but still go to vet school by doing a DVM PhD program? And that means that I again get paid to go to school, which is incredible. So the DVM is, of course, the doctorate of veterinary medicine. And then I'm getting my PhD in comparative biomedical sciences, like you said. But my research is all equine focused. And so I decided to start with my PhD. I was already in research mode for my master's, and I'll go into vet school in either 2026 or 2027. I'm still negotiating that with my current advisor, Dr. John Peroni, who is also incredibly awesome and a super supportive guy. But it's been not the path that, like you had mentioned earlier, that 12-year-old me saw myself on. I
Yeah.
thought I was just going to go into, ambulatory medicine and be a farm vet, and that's how my life was going to go. And because I, had this little bump in the road and I took opportunities, or I sought out opportunities, I guess, I ended up being here, and my whole trajectory has changed. I think
Yeah.
now I want to be a professor at a veterinary school so that I can teach other veterinary students, So I'm very grateful for all of the opportunities that I've been presented with.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an incredible story, and I love the shout out. I'm huge on building community and connections, right? So what Dr. Emma Adam did for you and with you deserves a huge accolade, right? Because
Absolutely.
it is so important for us to not only seek those people, but then for us to inspire, as those of us that are older, 5, 10 plus years ahead of others. Our job is to reach back and inspire and empower others to pursue dreams they don't even know they have because you didn't even know that it existed, right? And so I do love, the experience that you had not only at Gluck. Again, what an incredible team of people doing so much work that our industry really doesn't see. They don't see how many
Hmm.
vaccines they've been a part of and how much research happens that helps them help their horses. And so much of that is being done right here in Central Kentucky through the Gluck and its partnerships. So, really a huge shout out to the experience that you had there. And that at the end of the day, Jordan, it's meant to be. This is
Yeah.
like this was your path, and now you are living a path that you really just didn't even know existed. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And
And if I may,
yes.
um, just to remind our listeners that the reason that I didn't get into vet school the first time wasn't because I couldn't do it. It's because applying to vet school is one of the most competitive secondary educations that you can pursue in this country. There are currently only 33 vet schools in the United States. So it's incredibly difficult to get in, but it's not, if you get rejected from vet school, that doesn't have to be the end of the road.
Yeah.
Find something for yourself to do. And if you're still motivated to pursue vet med, you can do it. You might have to apply again, and that's okay,
Yeah.
but you will eventually make it if you want it.
Amen to that. That right there, right? Everyone needs to hear that. You might not get in the first time, you might not get in the second time. And all of that is meant for you to have the time that you need to build additional skills and experiences and a network that is going to help you get across the line. You can do it. So,
Yes,
yeah, such
absolutely.
such great advice. And so, and you do, speaking of advice, you have a few pieces of advice for our listeners. And one of those is really just that, to keep your options open, right? So you've told your story, but I just love that you say that you would never have found this path if it wasn't for seeking opportunities and actively engaging in the equine community. I just think that's really well said, right? That you can't just exist as a student. You do need to reach out and find people who are outside of your comfort zone, is sometimes how I say it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked at several farms in Kentucky while I was there. Like I said, I connected with Dr. Adam to do research. So I was trying to get experiences both from an industry perspective and from, a science and a vet med perspective. And I really think that that helped me because several of my industry connections ended up writing me letters of recommendation or told me about further scholarship opportunities. So, for example, I worked with Dr. Piper Clem of the Plaid Horse magazine. I groomed for Stonewall Ponies with Emily Ellick and Piper Clem, who have a partnership. And so I got to meet a lot of people that way. And because I showed up every day, I worked really hard. I was knowledgeable and polite. Piper was telling me about all of these opportunities with scholarships or introducing me to other big names in the industry. It was really cool. And while I didn't end up going down the industry path, I'm like so glad that I got to meet those people and learn about their horse experiences, what they do on their day to day, because I think that as a future veterinarian, that will make me a better provider for those animals.
Yeah. Yes, without a doubt. There'll be connections for life. Right? That's
Yes.
really, what we also have to understand. This is a very small industry. At the end of the day, all the people that you meet, you're going to see them again. You might
Yes.
work with them or work for them, or they might work for you. You have no idea what the next 10, 20, 30 years of your career and beyond are going to look like. So that's great advice. And you talk about also, Jordan, that being a veterinarian is absolutely not the only way to engage in equine and animal science. And I love this piece of advice really because so often as young people, especially at that middle and high school, age range, we think that we can either be a veterinarian or a horse trainer. And I've talked a
Yes.
lot about that on this show. That's one of the reasons why I love to highlight these different career journeys and paths. But you say there are so many ways to conduct equine related research. Like, you have a passion for science and research. Amen to that. For someone who's been in sales and industry forever, I would never have been able to be successful in sales if someone wasn't doing the research that brought those products and gave us the data that we could share as best medicine, right? So talk a little bit about that, whether it's opportunities to handle horses directly or work in a lab and apply your findings. Like, you love to talk about science.
Yes, I do love to talk about science. And one of the really cool things about equine science and maybe animal sciences generally is that there are options for you to be engaged in that kind of research that involve physically touching horses or just involve doing lab work or some blend of both. So, one of the really cool positions in the lab that I work in now at the University of Georgia, we have a laboratory technician whose whole job is to work with our research herd. So, he helps manage the research horses when people want to come in and use these horses for studies on insulin resistance or studies about metabolic disorders, or when companies come to us and ask us to conduct a study on a new supplement that they've created. So he still gets to engage in the research and he participates in data collection, but the majority of his job is handling the horses. And then we have other lab technicians. Both of our lab managers work primarily in the lab. And of course, we work with horse derived tissues, but it's all lab work, all bench work, and they really enjoy it. And we always get together every week and we talk to one another about the work that we're doing. When there is a study coming up that's working to horses, that's presented to our group. And if you want to go out and help, you have that opportunity. And that is pretty common, I think, in equine sciences because it was very similar at Gluck. We had people who were specifically helping take care of the horses. We had people who did specifically lab work, but then we were always provided the opportunity to go help out with horse studies that involved using the horses, or if somebody needed help with lab work, they would ask for that too. So I think it's important to keep in mind that, like you said, horse trainer and veterinarian aren't the only options out there. There are a lot of ways that you can pursue even equine science without necessarily having an advanced degree. If you have your college degree, you're totally qualified to work in a lab, especially if you took, some lab classes in college. These are skills that you can learn and that laboratory technicians can teach you, that you don't necessarily have to go to school for 8 more years like I chose to do these things, right? Like there are lots and lots of different options. And depending on whether you want to spend your time out in a barn every day, or if you want to spend, the colder months or the really hot months in the AC, which is super valid, you can do that. And you can still work with horses and make an impact.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because you call yourself a professional student, right?
I do.
So speak to that a little bit as far as the years in school and kind of what that means for you, your undergraduate career, followed by your master's and followed by where you are now. So some of us want to be professional students and some of us do not.
Yes, absolutely. I do well in school, obviously, and I enjoy it, so I don't mind this path. At this point, I've completed 7 years of secondary education, so that's 4 years of undergrad, 2 years in my master, and I'm a year into my PhD program. And I have about 7 more years left. So with this combo degree, you don't do the degrees concurrently, thank goodness. I don't think anybody would sign up to do that. But I've got maybe about 3 more years in my PhD and then 4 more years of vet school. And from there, I have the decision to do either a postdoc, which would be 3 years of more intense laboratory training. I could do a residency, so that's usually about 3 years of more intense clinical training, or I could go straight into practice. Having multiple degrees does give me a lot of opportunities, but that's not to say that you need all of this schooling in order to do all of those things, right? Like you could go straight from undergrad into a DVM program or into a PhD program, or even straight from undergrad into a DVM PhD program. You could go from undergrad and just, like I said, go work in a lab, go work on a farm. You have that capability. And I think you said this earlier, it's about networking and building that community. And because our community is very small, that is so important. So meeting other people and talking to them and getting to know them will open doors for you.
Yes, without a doubt. And so, Jordan, tell us just a little bit about, because I think we take for granted, probably as horse people, horse owners, what these products, how important research and development is to the products that we use and to the wellness and overall health of our horses. So I think you feel strongly of the importance of, what you doing helps research, helps owners, helps veterinarians, helps horses. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I might use this opportunity to talk a little bit about my own research. But in veterinary medicine, we like to practice evidence-based medicine so that we can give owners and their horses the best, most innovative care that they have access to. And so my particular research focuses on stem cell therapies. And I think horse owners are probably pretty familiar with them. One of the really cool things about horse medicine is that we tend to be pretty cutting edge. There is a high demand for these innovative therapies like stem cell therapies, and we actually already use them clinically in horses. But we still have a couple of questions that I feel we could answer in order to maximize the use of those therapies in horses. And one of those questions that I'm actually aiming to answer is when we administer stem cells, we usually do it by placing the stem cells directly into the bloodstream. And I want to know the steps that those cells then take to move from the bloodstream into the tissues and towards that site of injury that we're trying to treat with these cells. So I think my research has maybe an exciting opportunity to start to understand those mechanisms so that we could then target those mechanisms and make them work better so that these therapies can continue to do the amazing things that we think that they're doing in the horse's body, right? We give stem cell therapies to help heal soft tissue injuries, like super digital flexor tendon injuries are really popular to treat with stem cells. And I really think that they work, but I think that they could work even better. And so I want to address that kind of question and see how we can target processes during the stem cells moving through the body so that more of them make it to the injury, so that more of them participate in this healing response. And so I think it's really important, like you mentioned, to have science to answer these questions, because while horse medicine is definitely cutting edge and innovative, we're always asking the next question of how can we make this treatment better? But we also have to remember that we have questions about how can we make treatment safe and how can we make treatments accessible to multiple horse people, right? Like sometimes innovative medicine is expensive or inaccessible because the technology can't be taken out into the field. So how do we make that technology usable in a field situation and not just in a hospital? How do we make these treatments affordable for our patients? And how do we ensure that they're both safe and effective?
That's a lot, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot, but fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And that is what's so exciting about sharing your journey and your story and your passion is that there are people out there that are like, she does what? I want to be a part of that, right? And so until we are exposed and start to see that you can be involved in every level, I love how passionate you are about sharing these lab careers in addition to your own path. The technicians and lab managers that you've mentioned, those are really rewarding careers as well that are, involved in exactly what you're doing and really get the opportunity, to your point, to be maybe hands on, maybe very research based, or some combination thereof. So just really fascinating that you are opening, the door to so many of these careers in and around research and development.
Yes, I think it's important to remember too that you can't have a lab without lab techs and without lab managers and without that kind of support staff, if you will, but they're really integral to running a lab in the same way that veterinary technicians are integral to practicing medicine. You cannot practice medicine without a tech,
Yeah.
right? In the same way, you can't do lab work without your lab managers. And I love my lab managers. I ask them questions all the time. I meet with them regularly. They're super knowledgeable and valuable people. And just because they have different educational histories doesn't make them less important in our ecosystem.
Yes. Preach it, right? Like,
Yes.
yes, these are all the jobs in and around equine and animal health that we want to highlight and share with you. There are so many opportunities, listeners.
Yes,
So,
so many opportunities.
so many opportunities. So, Jordan, let's talk about a couple of questions that I always love to ask of my listeners. And so the first one is, and I'm excited for your answer on this one. Do you have a book or a podcast that you would recommend to our listeners? And if so, why?
Ooh, okay. So I can I do both? Can I have a book and
Yes,
a
of
podcast? Okay.
course.
So there is a book called The Tao of Equus, Tao of Equus. And it's an incredible book that talks about the emotional intelligence that horses have and that they can teach us. And I love this book. This was given to me actually by one of my teachers in high school, and it has stuck with me. I still have that book and I read through it sometimes. But just reminding us that horses are these incredibly emotionally intelligent animals, and we can learn so much from them. So 10 out of 10 book, definitely recommend. The podcast that I might recommend would be either Straight Out of the Horse Doctor's Mouth. That's run by an equine veterinarian, and she breaks down common equine diseases for a lay audience so that everybody can understand. So that if your horse maybe gets diagnosed with one of these diseases, it's not as scary. Um, I would recommend that. And then I would recommend just generally from a science, Ologies by Ali Ward. That's such a fun podcast. And
What's it
she
called
talks
again?
about ologies,
Ologies.
O
I
L
haven't heard of
O
that one.
G I E S. Emma Partridge actually showed me that podcast
Okay.
um,
Shout
by
out
Ali Ward.
Emma.
Yeah, shout out Emma. But she actually just invites scientists from an incredible array of fields to come and talk about their work, and it's so cool. There are disciplines of science I didn't even know existed and research that I didn't even know people do. So it's a fun podcast. I really like that one.
Yes, that's a new one on me, so I'll have to check it out. Now, I am always, and my listeners know this, I'm always focused so much more on people than science. So this is all so good for me. So I'm just learning, I'm soaking it in, Jordan. So my other question, we haven't talked a lot about this, but clearly your schedule is really demanding, right? You are spending a lot of time on your research, your PhD program right now. And so I love to talk about any advice you have for our listeners related to life balance in the face of today's kind of hustle culture, right? So you're moving through a demanding educational journey. And so, is there something that you would share about your life balance?
Yeah, I think work-life balance is super important. And it can be hard to find good work-life balance because of stigma associated with like if you aren't working 24/7, then you're not a hard worker, and that's just not true at all. I do my best to come in the morning, I get my work done, and I try my hardest when I can not to take my work home with me. So by the time that I'm back at my house and I'm with my pets and hanging out with my horse, like that's what I'm doing, and I'm not focusing on work. Another great thing that you can do to help with balance is setting specific times of day to respond to your emails, so you're not glued to your email all the time.
Yes.
So I set a time in the morning. That's like the first thing I do is check and respond to my emails. And if it's not an emergency, then I don't respond to my emails after like 6 p.m.
Yeah.
From there, they can wait until the next morning because in a true emergency, they'll just text or call you, right? So I think just creating boundaries for yourself and then really holding yourself to them, which is, I think, the trickiest part, right? Because
Yes.
we get these ideas about I'm not working hard enough. Um, and that's just not true. So it's a little bit of conditioning yourself to take a deep breath and say, it's okay if I don't respond to this email right now. It will wait until 8 o'clock tomorrow.
I think that's just such great advice. And we've talked, about some similar ideas before, but we have to continue repeating that to each other. I absolutely love that you've got some parameters around email. I believe that email can absolutely just destroy our time. And that oftentimes there are emails that could be a very quick text or phone call. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden they become 5, 6, 7 chain long emails. And we have to kind of take ownership of that. So, really setting those times of the day rather than going down that email trap. And all of a sudden, we're halfway through a day and we haven't accomplished anything that we set out to accomplish because we're too busy responding to our emails.
Right.
Yeah, really great
Yes.
advice. So,
You.
Jordan, as we wrap up, what other advice or, information would you love to share? There's one other thing that I think was my very favorite in our conversation prepping for your episode where you said, I am loquacious. And to be very honest with you, Jordan, I had to look that up. I grabbed my phone and I'm like, can you define loquacious? So tell us about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, so loquacious just means that I'm very talkative. And I do love to talk about my work and the things that I do because I am so excited about it. And I want other people to have that excitement because it really is special to love what you do. And while it is a huge part of my identity, it may be not my whole identity, but I I do love to share with people everything whenever an opportunity arises, anything that I can about horse research, horse medicine, horses generally.
Yes, I loved that and wanted to share because it is your passion, your energy, your enthusiasm is contagious. I know that our listeners will be able to hear that through you. How can they connect with you, Jordan? Where do they find you? Like, let's send them to learn a little bit more about you and the University of Georgia and all those things. So, where can they find you?
Yeah, they are always welcome to send me an email. If I don't respond right away, just remember that I have those email parameters. But my email is just my name, jordan.parker@uga.edu. And they can reach out to me on social media. It's also just jordan.parker17 on Instagram, I believe. But I'm always so happy to talk to other students. I will absolutely make time to talk to anyone that has questions, whether they want to meet via Zoom or if they just, want to send me an email. I would love to connect with future horse scientists and future horse people in general.
Yeah, you have so much to share, and I think it's going to be really a fun journey to watch as your PhD comes along, and then you transition, over to DVM as well. What an incredible journey that you have been able to share with us today. I know that it will inspire others to think about all the opportunities that you've shared, whether it's your particular journey or some of those supporting and aligned opportunities that you mentioned as well. So, anything as we finish up, Jordan, that you will share with the thriving equine professional listeners?
Just remember why you do what you do and why you love what you do. It's because of the horse, you know?
Ah, there you go. There's our mic drop. It is
There's our
because of the horse, right? That's why we do what we do, our love of the horse. Because I always joke, most of us didn't get into these roles because of our love for people. It is the love of the horse that
it
drives
is the love
us
of the
to
horse.
find the people that become our people. So
Absolutely.
good for
Absolutely. Thank you
you.
so much for having me
Oh,
on. I really appreciate this. Yeah.
oh, thank you. It's been so fun to have this conversation. I can't thank you enough. And Thrivers, we will see you back here, same time next week. Cheers.
Cheers.